Officer Nelson managed to keep it in the holster with his hand. And then he felt Jesse Sarey rip the knife out of his pocket. Mr. Kalpa described that pocket for you. The knife is on the inside of the pocket and the clip is on the outside. So when we talk about the DNA evidence and there being DNA everywhere, it's true, Mr. Sarey's DNA is on the gun and his DNA is also on the knife. The knife is a little bit of a different story because the knife is inside the pocket during the struggle. So the DNA that gets on the knife, Officer Nelson is going to tell you that Mr. Sarey grabbed that knife with his hand, that he had the knife, and that Officer Nelson thought he was going to stab him with it. And that is why he fired the first shot to defend himself. And now we see in the video, we're going to watch it again, we see Mr. Woodard pick that knife up off the ground. And it's not actually that the knife was just on the ground and Mr. Woodard said, oh, there's a knife, I'm going to pick it up. No. What happened is that Mr. Woodard got out of the car and the knife flew out of the altercation. He picked it up, he put it in the car, he's in the middle of this chaotic scene, and he doesn't think to tell the officer, I got the knife, I got the knife. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't see Officer Nelson look over at him or look over at the knife. Officer Nelson thought this whole time that Mr. Sarey had this knife. And he wishes every day for the last 5 years that he had looked over, that he had seen the knife. We wouldn't be here if he had seen it, but he didn't. He just didn't see that happen. After Mr. Sarey took the knife, Officer Nelson didn't see it fly out. The gun malfunctioned, or jammed, and he clears the malfunction, and we're going to talk about training in a little bit. But when someone has a knife and your firearm malfunctions, you've got to get that firearm back in the fight. So he clears the malfunction, he looks over, he sees Sarey still moving towards him, he thinks he has the knife, and he fires again. And that's what happened. And it's tragic. But that doesn't mean that it's a crime. One of the witnesses you're going to hear from is Commander Christian Adams of the Auburn Police Department. And the reason that we're calling Commander Adams is so that we can get an understanding of what it's really like to be an officer in Auburn. Through the course of this trial, you're going to hear a lot about training, about the basic law enforcement academy, about continuing training at Auburn. But the important thing to remember is that training is good, and our experts are going to tell you it's very helpful. But training isn't the real world. And it's not the reality of what happens every day in a place like Auburn. Commander Adams is going to tell you that the unofficial motto of the Auburn Police Department is we do more with less. They have approximately 100 officers at any given time, and they're what they refer to as a call-driven department. This means that if you're on patrol, what you're doing is responding to a series of 911 calls and citizens calling and needing assistance. And they have this system, computer-aided dispatch. It's like a computer in the patrol car, and it's constantly scrolling as 911 calls are coming in, and they're backing up, and they're responding to the calls, and there's an expectation in Auburn that calls will be cleared quickly. Officers are taught you are here to solve problems and to help people. If you can solve it with a discussion, we're going to talk about Officer Nelson's discussion with Mr. Sarey at the Walgreens, then do that. Solve it with a discussion, everyone goes their own way, move on to the next call. If that doesn't work, then you have to solve it with an arrest. And in Auburn, officers frequently have to arrest people for disorderly conduct. It's not an unusual offense, it's routine. It's busy, and that's what happens. And the other thing that Commander Adams is going to tell you is that in Auburn, the reality is that officers sometimes call for a second, start me a second, start someone to come join me, and then if it's a routine thing, they might start the contact by themselves. They might go start talking to the person, start the arrest process, especially for low-level offenses. So that's Auburn. That's kind of the setting and the context of what we're talking about. Let's talk about May 31st. What Mr. Couple was talking to, he was talking to you about that first interaction. We saw a screenshot of a video at the Walgreens. It actually, everything starts a little bit before that. Walgreens is the second 911 call about Jesse Sarey. The first one is the Dollar Tree. So at 5:20 p.m. on May 31st, the Dollar Tree employees called 911 because of some things that Mr. Sarey was doing. And I want to show you the CAD system. That's the computer I was talking about in the patrol car. It has a description of that call, and that is slide 2. So this is basically a screenshot of what you see if you're in your.
I'm sorry, but there's a juror raising their hand.
Oh. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's exactly what you should do if you can't see something. That's good.
And that one works.
Need the one on there.
Oh, it's turning on. It might. Well, that's a lot easier to see. Okay, so now everybody can see it. So these are the CADs, computer-aided dispatch of this call for the Dollar Tree. So you can see the exact information that Officer Nelson had. And it says 1720, which is 5:20 p.m. And this is the call that comes in. Disorderly, that's the nature of the call. Male throwing garbage around, banging windows, no known weapons. Male's in front of the location, possible has been drinking or high. Male GOA, which is gone on arrival, on foot towards Office Depot. Attempting to kick vehicles. Requesting trespass. And Commander Adams will tell you that what requesting trespass means is that the business has a person that they don't want to have come into their store. And so they're calling the police and they're saying, we would like you to respond and tell this person they can't come here. So the Dollar Tree requests the trespass. Officer Nelson and Officer Johnson get dispatched to this call. They drive around the area of the Dollar Tree. They look in the parking lot. But he is, as this says, GOA, gone on arrival. So they don't see Mr. Sarey at the Dollar Tree. And that's the end of that particular contact. The next thing that happens about 30 minutes later is what Mr. Cuffle was talking about, and that's the Walgreens call. So now Mr. Sarey is at the Walgreens. He's left the Dollar Tree. And he's outside of the business, and Walgreens calls 911. And we have slide 3 is the CAD for that call. And that call came in. This says 5:52, so 17:52 at the Walgreens. Suspicious subject, it comes out. Subject outside throwing items at vehicles, hitting and kicking the walls and red box machine. Unknown if he has been drinking or high, or if a mental health issue. Unknown if any property damaged yet. Reporting party inside, no visual. And then there's a description. What I want to show you at this point is the video, the KOMO system of Officer Nelson responding to this Walgreens call. So the way these patrol vehicles work is that once you're on shift, the video portion of what's called the KOBAN is recording out the front of the vehicle as the car is moving. That happens all day, every day. They don't have body-worn cameras in Auburn, so that's a good thing to know. But they have this KOBAN system, so it's recording. There's no audio. The audio for a KOBAN system only starts when an officer activates the audio system, and we'll talk about kind of why you do that. A lot of times you activate things, for instance, to record an arrest, so there is an audio record of what happened. That's when you'll activate it. It also activates automatically if you turn on your lights and sirens. So the video we're going to watch of Officer Nelson going to the Walgreens, there's no audio because he's going to this call, and we'll see where it goes. So he's turning left, and I'll show you a map in a little bit so you can see this again. But he's going to turn left, and he's kind of coming around towards the back area of the Walgreens is over on the left and farther back. So he turns into this road that separates the Walgreens from a coffee shop, not the Starbucks, the Bigfoot Java. He's going to go into this Walgreens parking lot. And at this point, he's looking for what we now know is Mr. Sarey. He's driving through. He's not going fast. And the Starbucks and the Walgreens kind of share a parking lot. So you're going to see him come around here, and then we're going to be pointed at the Starbucks. That's the Starbucks right there in front of you. And there's two teenagers who are going to come out of the Starbucks. And Officer Nelson's going to have a conversation with them. You won't see it because the camera points forward. But he puts his window down, and he has this conversation with them. And from that conversation, he knows where Mr. Sarey is. So he's going to park. That BR on, BR off is every time you hit the brakes. It says BR on and then off when you take your foot off. So he parks. He can see Mr. Sarey at this point. He's just kind of assessing, if, is this somebody I can approach? Decides that he can. Here he comes. All right. So he goes that direction, and Mr. Sarey is located there's an island between the Starbucks and the Walgreens. And during the evidence in the trial, you're going to see a lot of images of all of this and where it's located and how it all relates to each other. But there's an island right there, and Officer Nelson goes up to Mr. Sarey, and he's going to tell you. He goes up and he introduces himself. That's usually the first thing that you do. I'm Officer Nelson from the Auburn Police Department. And he observes that Mr. Sarey has a white substance on the side of his mouth. He's sweating. He's got his fist balled up. And Officer Nelson thinks that he's high on a narcotic. So, as training dictates, Officer Nelson decides, I need to de-escalate this situation a bit. Let's bring this down. So he starts by asking, are you okay? Do you need medical help? And Mr. Sarey says, fuck off, you can leave. Officer Nelson tells Mr. Sarey, hey, there have been 911 calls about what you've been doing. Let's just take it down a notch. We can both go our own ways. Sarey walks off towards the Walgreens. And now I want to actually show you the Walgreens video that we saw that still of. The Walgreens video, this video doesn't capture that interaction that's on the island because you're looking kind of out the front door of the Walgreens. The Starbucks is over on your right in the corner, and so is that area with the parking lot. But we're going to see Mr. Sarey come into view, and Officer Nelson will tell you, at that point, Officer Nelson has picked up an ID bracelet that Mr. Sarey has dropped. And it's the type of ID bracelet that's important for the unhoused to have. And so he calls Mr. Sarey back to him. And we're going to see Mr. Sarey come forward, and then he's going to go back to get the bracelet from Officer Nelson. There he is, right there, in the right-hand corner. And now he's going back to talk to Officer Nelson, who's going to remind him again, okay, let's just be cool. Gives him back the bracelet. And then you're going to see Mr. Sarey come back into view. There he is. The video skips right there a little bit. He's not actually going fast. So here comes Mr. Sarey, and then you're going to see Officer Nelson. And Officer Nelson will tell you he's going to come and stand between the front door to the Walgreens and Mr. Sarey. And this is because the Walgreens has called 911. And so Officer Nelson is just making sure that Mr. Sarey doesn't go into business. Mr. Sarey approaches Officer Nelson, and you'll see Officer Nelson step back. Mr. Sarey has said about the Walgreens employee, they're going to give me some money. Those motherfuckers are going to give me something to drink. But Officer Nelson lets Mr. Sarey walk away because at this point he just wants to see, is this discussion enough? So we're going to see this for quite a few seconds here, Officer Nelson watching him. And at this point, Mr. Sarey, as Mr. Capo told you, was crossing Harvey Road towards the Sunshine Grocery. And what he's seeing is that, unfortunately, Mr. Sarey is still being disruptive. It's not an emergency. He's not running to his patrol car, but there have been a couple 911 calls. This is continuing. He's decided he's going to arrest him for disorderly conduct. So he walks off towards his patrol vehicle. He talks to a woman in a van, flags him down. Her voice is loud. She sounds scared and upset. She talks to Officer Nelson about Mr. Sarey. And then Officer Nelson is approached by Daniel Ezzo. He's going to be a witness in this case. He's the Starbucks manager. And Officer Nelson tells Mr. Ezzo that Mr. Sarey is just homeless and down on his luck. So Officer Nelson's perception at that time, after he's interacted with Mr. Sarey at the Walgreens, what his perception is that this is just somebody who's down on his luck. But we're going to have to do something about it. So he goes to his patrol vehicle, and he gets in. And I'm going to show you the drive from the Walgreens to the Sunshine Grocery, because there's a couple of things that are significant. One is that he's not going fast. He's not aggressive. He's just going to take care of a problem. The second thing I want you to notice is that he activates the KOMO system. He's decided to make an arrest, and he's going to report it. So he's going to activate the KOMO system, and it's going to say K945. And by the way, K945, so each officer has their own letter number combination. K945, Officer Nelson is a K9 officer, so you're going to hear when this audio plays, and you can hear it in the other video probably, you hear a dog. That's because Cohen, his K9, is in the back of the patrol vehicle. So if we could play this. So he's backing out of the Starbucks. Going to come around kind of the back end of the Walgreens parking lot. Now he's coming it's basically we're going the other direction through the Walgreens. Straight across, this is Harvey Road. Straight across from here is the Sunshine Grocery. It's going to take this right. It's going to call for a second officer, because some of this...
I try to put this phone to a parking area by the taco place. Copy your NBC message and 220 if you get back to the suspicious vehicle 30727 Green River Road Southeast. Correction, 30724 Green River Road Southeast. Vehicle has been at location multiple times. It's occupied by two. The parking officer went out previously and then ended up leaving because they were reporting her, and the officer was not comfortable running by herself, and the RP called back about the time delay about 40 minutes ago. The gray Ford Taurus. Copy. John, sorry, confirming and copy your details. Copy, thank you.
K945, can you start me a second to the Maestro Barbershop, 1400, Auburn North?
Just about K945, it's Barbershop, 1400, Auburn North. 20, I'll deliver for that. 20, copy. Drop 30, some traffic.
So that's Officer Nelson. He waits at that left turn light onto Auburn Way because it's not an emergency. It's a routine arrest. He asks dispatch to start me a second. As he pulls into the Sunshine Grocery, what we hear is two officers respond that they're responding to the same channel or some language like that that means we will do that. Officer Nelson didn't hear that. He had seen Mr. Sarey, who at this point is crouched down between the open door of the Sunshine Grocery and an ice box. And Officer Nelson takes a look at that, and he decides that it's okay to approach this person. He's in a contained area. He's crouched down. I'm going to approach, and I'm going to start this arrest process. And so let's talk about that and the cameras. Mr. Coppola was talking to you about camera 7 and camera 8, and I thought it might be helpful for us to see the actual viewpoint from each camera. And so what we've done, what a lot of the experts have done, is they've zoomed way in on these videos, but it's important to get a sense of how far away these cameras really are. So if we could bring up the camera 7 viewpoint. So this is the actual untouched, unedited view from camera 7. The area of interest, of course, is that very top upper right corner where the patrol vehicle is. That's what we're going to spend. Grant Fredericks is coming here days. We're going to pick it apart, image by image, pixel by pixel. Conclusions are going to be made, all based on an area that far away from this camera. So that's why it's a good thing that we have Officer Nelson to tell us about what happened. We have Mr. Woodard even, because picking apart these images piece by piece is not the same thing as being in the situation yourself. There are two video experts in this case, so just to talk about them for a second. There's Grant Fredericks, who we heard about. He's coming here shortly. We also have an expert. His name is William Neal. They did very different things in this case. So Grant Fredericks did what's called a reverse projection analysis, and he will explain that to you. But it involves going to the scene. He's got kind of this large cardboard ruler and blue masking tape, and he's determining angles and matching what's on the camera today with what was on the camera back then, so he can measure. Well, actually, I'm sorry, he doesn't actually measure things, but what he does is he looks and he's going to tell you about the pixels and where they're going. William Neal does something slightly different. He does something called reverse photogrammetry, which until this case I did not know what that is, but we are all going to learn about it. Reverse photogrammetry is where you actually go out to the scene and you take what's called a faro scanner. It's kind of on a tripod, and it whirls and it takes essentially millions of pictures of a particular area. You take that and you create a computer modeled environment with those images that is to scale, and then you can take the video, what we have here, of what occurred, and you can match it up with your computer modeled environment, and that's actually how you measure things. So he's going to tell you about particular measurements that are going to be very relevant or important to what we see in this video. So Mr. Calfo showed you the view from camera 8. I think what I would like to do is just to make sure that you get to see the video at least, again, all together without an expert telling you what you see, but just so that you can watch it. I think we should watch it from camera 7, and there's a couple things that I would ask that you pay attention to. One is how Nelson approached Mr. Sarey. He doesn't run up on him. He walks over there. And I want you to listen to his tone of voice. One of the things Mr. Calvo said they teach in training is speak calmly. And that's true, they do teach that. And if you listen to it again, what you're going to hear is that Mr. Nelson's voice is very calm. And I want you to listen. It's hard to hear, but we have a lot of weeks here, so we can look at it again. I want you to listen and hear Mr. Nelson, Officer Nelson, say to Mr. Sarey, not once but twice, when Mr. Sarey is up, he says, just listen to me. Just listen to me. But Mr. Sarey is not doing that. I want you to listen again for that interaction between Mr. Woodard and Mr. Sarey and what Mr. Woodard is saying in the moment at the time. And look at when Woodard picks up the knife and puts it on the hood of the car, and you can see and hear that he doesn't tell Officer Nelson anything about that. And you can hear When Officer Nelson says to Mr. Sarey, I told you to stop picking stuff, stop throwing stuff, Sarey says, agreed. And so these are kind of things, as we watch it again, that I would ask that you look out for. So if we could play that.
Copy. John 30 in traffic.
I told you to stop picking stuff, stop throwing stuff, right? Okay, so now you're going to put your hands behind your back. Okay? You got to put your hands behind your back. Huh? Okay. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct. Okay? Put it down. You stop touching me, boy. Hey, listen to me. Keep your hands off of me. What the hell are you doing? What's on there? Good. I'm here to relax. Fucking stupid ass. Stop resisting, dude. Just go down. Stop me. Bullshit, you're not. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Holy shit, he just shot him! Dude!
What we're going to look at after that is, as I said earlier, the first thing that Mr. Woodard said after he witnessed what happened. We're going to listen to the audio of Mr. Woodard. It starts, there's no video, but it starts back when he starts yelling, stop resisting, just go down. Starts there. And then it's going to go through, and if we could put up the transcript without the audio. So it's going to go through, and there's no transcript. There is a transcript, but I didn't put it up here, of that first part because we've now listened to it quite a few times. But what's important here, and we're going to listen to this is right afterwards, so you're going to hear it all in sequence yourselves. Mr. Woodard, the first thing that he says about this is resisting, and then he fucking tried to grab his fucking gun. And Officer Nelson says to Mr. Woodard, hey, I need you. I need you to stay here and tell people what you saw. Mr. Woodard says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I'm not going nowhere. Now we're going to listen to this.
You just go down. Absolutely wrong. Bullshit, you're not. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Holy shit, he just shot him. Shots fired. Dude. Holy shit.
Oh my God, he just got Did he do anything? Are you okay? Are you okay? Officer, are you okay? Do you need help? Yeah, no, come on, Claire. No. Holy fucking shit. What just happened?
And this is actually, this transcript, I didn't mention it, this was created by the state's audio expert, by the prosecution. So this is a transcript of Mr. Woodard's first reaction. And Mr. Calfo talked to you about this 3.4 seconds. I think he was going 1,000, 2, 1,000, something like that. And that's the time between the first and the second shot. And I really want to make sure that we talk about this. It's not 3.4 seconds, really, that Officer Nelson had to decide whether Jesse Sarey was still a threat. And if we can bring up the slide 12. we have an expert, he's a professor at Montana State. He created this. This is what it's called a spectrograph. And it's essentially a visual representation of audio waves. And so you have this timed out. And you see, we agree, it's this 3.446 seconds between the first and second shot. And if you see in the middle where it says rack onset, rack end, I'm going to talk about that. So we have the first shot. The gun malfunctions. Mr. Kalfa was telling you about tap, rack, and assess. That's right. So you have to clear a malfunction. If you are in a deadly encounter, you have to get your firearm ready. You have to do that. That's the training. That's what Officer Nelson did. So he realizes that he has a malfunction, and this rack onset, this is when he starts pulling back the top of the firearm, which is called the slide. That's how you fix it. So he starts pulling it back. Rack end is when it snaps back into place, and it's fixed. Now, he's done that. Mr. Woodard's right there. He looks over at him, and then he looks back at Mr. Sarey, who he sees coming back up towards him. And he believes that Mr. Sarey has the knife. And the medical examiner in this case is going to tell you that that first shot is not incapacitating, meaning that someone who is shot, it seems remarkable, but people who are shot, some of them get up and run. I'm going to tell you about that. He sees Mr. Sarey there, and he decides to fire a second shot in this 1.149 seconds, not 3.4 seconds. We have another expert who's going to kind of add to this piece of things. His name is Steve James. He's a professor at Washington State University. He is a criminologist, and what he studies is deadly force encounters. And he actually goes and he helps various departments and academies with issues relating to force and perception. So he has a lab, and you're going to see a video of it, where he's had hundreds of officers come through, and what they do is it's almost like virtual reality. So there's a deadly force encounter they're viewing on these screens, and they have a fake firearm, and they're viewing it, and what he's looking at is how long from the time the deadly force threat is seen by the officer to when they actually fire, how long does it take for that process to happen mentally, because it's not instantaneous. And what he's found and what he will tell you is that the average officer in a lab setting, so not in the real world, in a lab setting, it's 1.3 seconds. So this 1.149 seconds is not Officer Nelson sitting there, taking his time, trying to figure it out. What is happening is he thinks that Mr. Sarey has the knife. He looks over, he's coming at him, and he fires. That's what that's about. The other experts you're going to hear from are use of force experts, both for the state and the defense. The state's use of force expert is from Idaho, northern Idaho. Our experts are from Washington. They went to the Basic Law Enforcement Academy here. They were officers in departments here, and they know what policing is like in Washington. And everyone, even the one from Idaho, they're all going to agree that policing is a hard job. And a lot of you said that when we talked to you. We all know that. And unexpected things happen. And dangerous situations can occur just like that. Something that's routine, that's a normal arrest, it can turn on a dime, and you don't know when that's going to happen. And they will tell you that officers are trained on what to do when that happens. Officers are trained from the academy on that if somebody grabs your firearm, that is a deadly force situation. That is a lethal threat. And they are told again and again so that they don't hesitate. They are told, if somebody grabs your gun, they are trying to kill you. And they are shown statistics about what happens to police officers when somebody gets their gun, and about how they get shot, and about how some of them die. And so the training is, this is a lethal threat. And so what the experts are going to tell you is that if somebody grabs your gun and somebody takes your knife, what you should not ever do is pull out a taser. Officer Nelson had a taser. that is not how you respond to a lethal threat. A taser works in 2 ways. One is called a drive stun tase, and this is when an officer takes the taser and makes direct contact with somebody. That does not immobilize people. It's unpleasant, but it's not going to stop somebody who has a knife. The other way to use a taser, you fire it, and these 2 kind of prong things come out. They're probes. And it's effective if you get the probe spread right. So that means you have to be far enough away for one probe to be ideally in the upper body and one probe in the lower body. That creates a connection, and that will stop somebody. But tasers don't always work. In fact, a lot of times they don't work. And you can't get a probe spread like that in a really close encounter. And our experts will tell you, you've also, if you take out your taser in that situation, you have now introduced this taser into the fight, and you could lose it. The other thing that you do not do, if somebody grabs your gun and they take your knife, is you do not release a canine. And that is because if a canine is in a patrol vehicle and its partner, they call them partners or handlers, is outside and you release that dog into a populated area, the dog does not know which of these people is the threat. If he had released a canine, that dog, the experts will tell you, could have bitten Mr. Woodard. It could have bitten somebody else outside. Dogs are not able to identify that this person right here is the threat. But that is not an appropriate thing to do. The other thing they're going to tell you is that officers are taught that you do not disengage if you are in a confined space with tripping hazards if somebody is a lethal threat. You'll see pictures of the outside of the Sunshine Grocery. There's kind of this area between the door and the icebox that's raised like a curb. There's parking strips. There's a little area between the parking strip and that raised area. And this is an area where if you take a step back, you might trip. And officers are taught that, one, that people go forward faster than they go back. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that if you go back and you trip, and somebody's trying to take your gun, your knife, you're in a really bad situation. So you don't disengage. The other thing they're going to tell you, we saw the picture of that holster, is that a holster, it's not like, oh, I have a holster, you can grab my gun, that's fine. You can grab a gun out of a holster. It's certainly possible, and it happens. I just have a few more things to tell you, and I appreciate your patience. The first is that we are not going to ask a lot of questions of all the witnesses. So there's going to be a lot of witnesses, and if the witness is saying something we don't really think is that important or we don't disagree with it, we may not even ask them anything. So the volume of questions is going to vary, and it doesn't have that much meaning. So just keep that in mind, at least when the state's witnesses are testifying. The bad news for you is that there are a lot of experts in this case. And it's technical, it's complicated, and it's going to take a long time. But we do ask, and I know that you'll pay attention, because it's important. So the things I want to leave you with are these. Jesse Sarey's actions prompted 2 separate businesses to call 911. Officer Nelson told the Starbucks manager at the time, before he ever went to the Sunshine Grocery, that Jesse Sarey was a homeless person who was down on his luck. Officer Nelson wasn't feeling aggressive towards him. That's how he described him. And that he thought he could start a routine arrest on his own. And now we know he was wrong, but he didn't know it at the time. That this became a deadly force situation when Jesse Sarey grabbed Officer Nelson's gun. Just like Mr. Woodard said, it is not true that Mr. Woodard never saw Sarey do anything that was a threat. That's what Mr. Calvo told you. That's not true. You heard Mr. Woodard. First thing he said, that he tried to grab his fucking gun. Woodard got out of his car, see if Officer Nelson needed help. Jesse Sarey's DNA is not only on the gun, it's also on the knife, a knife that was in a pocket until he took it out. Officer Nelson felt, and he saw Jesse Sarey grab that knife, and he saw him with the knife. And he just didn't see Mr. Woodard pick up the knife. And as I said before, he wishes that he did, but he didn't. And that's why these are not crimes. This is a tragedy all around. It's very sad. But there's a difference between a tragedy and a crime. And after you've heard all this evidence and these months that we're going to spend with you, or weeks maybe, at the end of this, we're going to ask you to find Officer Nelson not guilty of murder and not guilty of assault. And I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we are going to give you a little break. When we come back, we'll be in session for about an hour and a half. We will recess at 3 o'clock today. When you come back, you will have, Ms. Doris will have passed out to each of you your notebooks. They'll be sitting on your chairs, and you'll be able to tell yours because they will have your individual juror number on them. And that will consistently be your notebook to use throughout this trial. Now, if everyone will please rise for our jury. Is there anything we need to address?
No, not from the defense.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then we'll have Mr. Fredericks come in and get set up, and as soon as he is ready to go, let me know. We'll get our jury out. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Recess.
Yeah, is it okay if I?
Yeah. be seated.
Thank you for the extra time, Your Honor. It took a little bit longer to set it up, and we'll probably have to do some tweaks as of Monday, but I think we've got it operational for now.
Okay. Just a second. Just want to remind the parties that we need to have the jury walking out the door at 3 o'clock, so just be mindful of that.
Walking out of the courtroom or walking out of the bathroom?
Walking out the courtroom.
Okay.
Well, needs to be walking out of the building by 3 to accommodate. So that means you probably need to stop at like about 5 minutes till 3.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Ms. Doris, are we ready for our jury? Are they ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Okay, members of the jury, you now have your notebooks. Those will remain your notebooks throughout the trial, reminding you of the court's instructions to you about the use of them and where to keep them that I read to you this morning. Just want to make sure, everybody test to make sure your pens work, that you're all good before we get going. We usually have extra pins in here. We'll make sure that we have some on each side of the jury box. Monday, we forgot to do that, though. Is everybody good? Everybody's pen working all right? All right. State, are you ready for your first witness?
We are, Your Honor. The state calls Grant Fredericks.
Mr. Fredericks, please come forward. And if you raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear affirm that the information you're about to provide is the truth under penalty of perjury under the laws of Washington?
I do.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fredericks.
Good afternoon.
For the record, could you please state your full name and spell your first and your last name?
Yes, my name is Grant Fredericks. First name is spelled Grant. Last name is Frederickes.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I am a certified forensic video analyst.
And kind of at a high level, can you tell the jury what it means to be a forensic video analyst?
I examine video and audio data, primarily recorded to digital video recording systems, to assist a trier of fact, in this case a jury, to understand how video is created, how the images are compressed, and what the motion and timing issues may be in those video images in order to properly interpret them.
And we're going to talk a little bit more later about some of these things, but perhaps you can just explain a few of the terms that you used. You said how video is compressed. Can you explain to the jury what that means?
Yes. In the old days, video was recorded to a videotape, and I think many of us really remember those days. The transition from video to digital occurred in about 2004 to 2010 in both the broadcast and the surveillance market. The process of encoding, recording video to a computer is very different from an analog videotape. it uses compression. Compression is the process of sampling what the camera would see, and then in order to store that and reduce the amount of data requirements, compression throws away information. So it throws away, in essence, what's called redundant information, and it uses prediction to create a series of images. It uses several different methods to do that, which could, in some cases, alter the meaning or the perception of the video images. And so compression can have an impact on how images look to a layperson, and it requires sometimes a forensic analysis to determine not just what images are accurate, but what portions of the images are more accurate than others.
Okay. And is that part of what you do as a forensic video analyst?
Yes,
And how long have you been working in this field?
for over 30 years.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your background, and how did you come to be a certified forensic video analyst?
My undergraduate degree is in broadcast television. I worked in television for a number of years. At a certain point in my career, I began to work with law enforcement, producing examinations of video evidence, became interested in that field, and eventually became a police officer. I'm from Canada, so I was a police officer in Vancouver, Canada. And after working the street for a number of years, I kept getting pulled in to do forensic video work in video-related cases, and eventually took over as the lead of the forensic video unit for the Vancouver Police Department. At about the same time, I was teaching at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and I was a contract instructor for the FBI from about 2000 until December of last year, when I retired from that position. And I've been working with both criminal and civil cases as an independent forensic video analyst since about 2002, and have testified many hundreds of times in that capacity.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when did you work for the Vancouver PD?
I was a police constable and then acting sergeant of the video unit. I started there in 1988 and was there for 12 years until 2000.
And then you said that you had your own business as a forensic video analyst. Is that right?
Yes.
When did you start that business?
I was operating it first in Vancouver. I immigrated to the United States with my family. I met my wife at Gonzaga in Spokane, and she took me back to Spokane when I left the police department, and then reincorporated here in 2000.
And I think you mentioned that you've been involved in teaching forensic video analysis. When did that teaching start?
I was the lead instructor for an international organization called the Law Enforcement and Emergency Services Video Association. I started working with that group in 1994 and became lead instructor in 1988, and I was the lead instructor till about 2012. Continued teaching and consulting on their certification program for a few years after that, and I continue my certification with that group.
And have you continued teaching even to this day?
Yes.
And in fact, were you supposed to be teaching next week?
I was supposed to be teaching, yes, next week.
And who are you going to teach to next week?
That was for the Washington State Sheriff's Association. They have a conference in Seattle, in Spokane.
And you said you were teaching at the FBI National Academy. Were there any other places that you've taught related to forensic video analysis?
Yes, I've taught. I'm not sure how many dozens of classes throughout the U.S., Canada, Singapore, the UK, for various groups and organizations. The FBI National Academy was one group for the Department of Justice. The other was the FBI Leadership group, and I taught for them for I think about 4 years, ending in December of last year.
Now, you mentioned a minute ago the Law Enforcement and Emergency Services Video Association. Is that also known as LEVA?
It is, yes.
And what exactly is that group?
LEVA is an organization made up of video analysts from around the world. Its primary core activity is training, and it focuses on training forensic video technicians and then forensic video analysts. Also, its members are involved in standards, writing standards, and documentation to support the correct uses of video for investigations and for the courts.
And when you first started introducing yourself, you mentioned that you were certified. Is LEVA who certifies you?
Yes.
All right. And it sounds like there's a specific course and exams that you have to take in order to become certified as a forensic video analyst. Is that right?
Yes, it's about 180 hours of classroom training. There's 4 core courses. Each one requires testing, and then ultimately one has to be presented to a board of peers and defend a series of work projects. And then if all of that requirement is completed and the boarding, the interviews go well, then there's a decision made by the committee, and ultimately certification is the goal of that. One has to recertify every 3 years.
And have you ever published any materials or writings on video evidence?
I've written a lot of documentations, nothing that's been peer reviewed.
And you mentioned that you've also testified as an expert. Can you give us an idea of how many times you think you've testified as an expert witness in courts?
Many hundreds of times.
And in terms of those cases, have they been civil cases, criminal cases?
Sort of a mixture. I think if it take the whole 30 years, it's probably mostly criminal, but if the past 10 to 15 years, it's been a pretty even mix of civil and criminal.
And when you get hired in the criminal case, can you give us an idea of how many times you get hired by the prosecution versus getting hired by the defense?
Our goal in the office, and I have a case intake manager, and her responsibility is to sort of weigh how many defense cases we currently have on the criminal side versus prosecution, and then on the civil side, how many plaintiffs and defending cases we have, and she tries to balance it. And I'm trying to retire right now, but for a time we were very, very busy, so it was quite easy to make that balance. So we try to maintain a 50-50 in criminal work between defense cases and prosecution, and then the civil side, the same sort of balance between plaintiffs and defendants.
And why do you do that? Why do you want to make sure that you're splitting your time, so to speak, between prosecution and defense, or plaintiff and defendant?
From not just my own perspective, but from my peers' perspective, it really helps us be better analysts because we're not biased to one perspective. And I think for me, it really does help me maintain that objective, unbiased sort of approach to my work.
And in terms of your testimony, can you just give the jury an idea of when you testify, what are you typically testifying about?
Typically, the digital video can be fairly complicated in the compression process. And so the first thing that I look to is the video fit for the purpose that I'm being asked to examine it for? Is the resolution appropriate for the examination? And depending on what the questions are, and if it sort of meets the minimum requirements for fit for purpose testing, then I look at all the technical issues that could have an impact on analysis, examination, and ultimate opinion. And then I focus in on those technical issues. And then from there, my examinations usually look at things like timing, the accuracy of the timing from image to image. Look at motion and what causes motion and how fast is motion depicted in the video, and not just from image to image, but within an image, so a temporal examination of motion. And that refers to looking at things like motion blur, how long the image is sampled for, how much light comes in while a motion is occurring. It helps us determine what in this single image might have been moving faster than an object that was not moving as fast but is in the same image. The compression, I look to what's called redundancy, how much information in the compression process is actually using old information to create a picture. And I have the tools that enable me to quantifiably and visually demonstrate how much redundancy is being used from image to image, because when we're assessing the reliability of an image, we have to know how much information is actually borrowed from previous pictures.
And were you hired as an expert in this case?
Yes.
And when was that?
I think early or 2020 sometime.
Okay. Does October of 2019 sound about right or no?
Can I take a peek at my note real quick?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. At the end, yes, the end of 2019, and then the majority of the work was in 2020.
And who were you hired by, sir?
I would ask that whatever he's looking at be marked, entered as an exhibit, to refresh his recollection.
Oh, okay.
We can mark it.
We'll mark it later. We'll go ahead.
And, I'm sorry, may I go forward, Your Honor? Yes. All right. And who were you hired by, sir?
Initially by the King County Sheriff's Office, or pardon me, King County Prosecutor's Office.
And what were you hired to do in this case?
I was asked to examine various videos that were recorded in a particular area of the city, and look at in-car video, the audio from the in-car video recording system, and then CCTV systems from some businesses.
When you say
And-
CCTV, are you talking about surveillance type video?
Digital video recording systems.
All right.
And I was provided with a number of images and other data from the scene, and then I was asked to examine that data, including the video and audio information, and then to do an alignment, and then to conduct an analysis of various events.
Were you also involved in performing, and we'll talk about this later, but what's called a reverse projection?
Yes.
All right. And you mentioned that you were processing the video. Can you just explain to us what you mean by that when you say processing the video?
The video is, a lot of the video was proprietary. And so in order to examine it correctly, I have a forensic system that can read the raw data files, and then to ensure that they're being played back correctly, and then to produce exhibits, that's the processing part, to do magnifications, the enlargement, so that we can see what's occurring, and to do various analytical processes, which is the looking at the redundant images, the redundant areas within pictures. Those are all processing features.
And you mentioned that the sources of the video that you looked at were a Coban in-car video, is that right?
Yes.
And CCTV or surveillance video?
Yes.
And I think you also said some audio from the Coban, is that right?
Yes.
And as part of your work, did you visit the scene where the video evidence was recorded?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Twofold. One was to conduct an analysis of what's called reverse projection, to examine the positions of two primary cameras, to do what's called a reverse projection overlay, where I take the historic images that were recorded at the time of the events and then examine contemporary images from the same cameras when I was doing my visit, and then to do an overlay to determine positions of objects. When I do a dissolve overlay, we can kind of see the historic images laid over the contemporary view, and then determine the XY coordinate for the picture element, where things happen to be and how they align. in order to conduct some measurements and then to familiarize myself with the scene.
And did you prepare an exhibit showing the locations of some of the surveillance cameras with the video that you reviewed?
I did.
I'm going to ask to have this marked as an exhibit, please.
States Exhibit 3 marked for identification.
Thank you. I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 3. Now, this is a hard copy. If you could take a look at it and tell us if you recognize it.
Yes.
And is that the exhibit you prepared to show the various camera perspectives, the PDF of it?
Yes,
And do you also have that electronically?
I do.
All right. And could you pull that up, what's now been marked as Exhibit 3, but might be marked as number 1 in your system? May I publish? I'm sorry. Let me offer it first. I offer Exhibit 3, Your Honor.
Any objection? Pardon me?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 3 is admitted and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. My apologies. Let's see, we got to get all the T's on, I think. Oh. All right, and if you could just kind of take the jury through this exhibit, please, sir.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the one monitor. Okay, it's up now. It's up now. This is a PDF document, and when I go through this, there are numbers at the bottom of each. We call them a slide rather than a page, and the numbers are in yellow, and this title page is just slide 1. And then there's a particular way to use this if it's going to be used later on.
Okay,
Okay.
we can talk about that in a minute, but why don't
Okay. All right.
we do that here? Go ahead.
And I'll advance to slide 2. This is an area of Auburn, bounded by Harvey Road and Auburn Way North.
And just for the purposes of the record, you're clicking, are you kind of clicking through? Maybe you can just explain what you're doing and what's populating on the PDF.
Yes, this is a Google Earth view, and I'm using the right and left arrow keys on my keyboard just to move forward and backwards. And I placed annotations to assist in identifying the area.
Okay, so if you could again walk through and show us what we're looking at here.
Yes. Again, Harvey Road in Auburn, Auburn Way North. This is identifying on slide 5 the location of the Sunshine Grocery. And then on slide 6, pointing to the position of Walgreens, there's an interior camera. That interior camera has a field of view, and I've marked that field of view with kind of a sort of a reddish overlay. And that is the approximate left and right hand perspectives, and then as much as the camera can see forward. And that's the front entrance camera. And then on slide 7, there's a business called Merchant Acceptance, and it has a camera 8, and I'm using my cursor to point to the end of the red arrow. That's the location of the camera at the bottom right-hand area of this green overlay, and that's its field of view.
And when you say that's its field of view, what are you referring to?
Camera 8's field of view.
Right, are you referring to the picture up in the upper left-hand corner of the picture?
Yes, that's an image from camera 8.
Okay, maybe you can put your cursor over it.
Yes. Top left-hand corner.
Okay, so that's depicting what camera 8 is looking at, is that correct?
Correct. And so if we follow along the left-hand side of the image, which is along, as I'm pointing to the image itself, and then in the background is Auburn Way North, and that's Auburn Way North right here that I'm pointing to.
Okay, and then you've indicated the field of view with green from camera 8, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Camera 7, again, is a merchant acceptance camera, and it's on the other side of the merchant acceptance building at the end of the red arrow. and its field of view on the right-hand side captures a portion of the building, which is opposite, which has the grocery store. And then it also captures Auburn Way North, and so there's that overlap between camera 8 and camera 7, where they both, I'll just go back, they both capture the same area of interest, which is in front of the grocery store.
And then on both 7 and 8, with the picture overlaid over the Google map, are you able to kind of zoom in on that on this PDF so that the jurors can kind of see the area that is of interest in this case?
I can. Moment, please. So this is the area that I'm showing is the area of interest just on the right-hand side of the field of view
Okay.
of that camera.
And then what about with the camera 8 and you do the same thing with respect to that perspective?
Yes.
To orient the jurors as to which area to be looking at.
Oh, one sec, please. This PDF isn't really meant to be viewed that way, so it's a bit awkward, but this is the area of interest, which is right at the near the grocery store entrance, and there's an ice chest here, and this is the area of interest.
Okay. And then you mentioned a minute ago that there's a way to view these PDFs, and the jury will have this as an exhibit. So can you just explain how the jury can kind of view these PDF like this that's one of the exhibits?
Yes. When it's opened, just by double-clicking the document, if you hold down the control key on the keyboard that will be provided, and then strike the L key, it will force it to go full frame. It's easier to watch this way, and then depending on what slide it's on, there's a home key on the keyboard you'll be provided. If you hit the home key, it'll go to the first page. And then if you use the arrow keys, you can move forward, or the left arrow key will move backwards. And then when you're done, you can hit Control Q, and it will close the document. Or just escape, and that will just reduce it.
Great, thank you. Could we go back to slide 6, and you showed us the camera view from the Walgreens.
Yes.
All right. And you indicated on slide 6 what the camera perspective was. Did you review the video from Walgreens?
Yes.
And have you prepared an exhibit of a portion of that video evidence?
Yes.
And what did you do to prepare that evidence? To prepare that exhibit?
I use a forensic system to bring in the original data from the recording view, located the area of interest, and then created what's called a sub-clip. So a clip that starts just at the beginning of the events, concludes at the end of the events, and then created an exhibit of that activity.
All right. I'm going to ask the clerk to mark this exhibit.
State's Exhibit 4.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 4. This cannot be published yet, but can you just take a look at it on your computer and tell us whether or not that is the video that you prepared from Walgreens?
Yes.
All right, I'd offer Exhibit 4.
Any objection?
The only issue is I haven't seen this whole thing because it was just handed to me. The only issue is I haven't seen this whole thing because it was just handed to me. So,
The same thing from the supplemental report, Council. If you want to take a minute, that's fine.
I don't watch the whole thing, I fast forwarded it, but it should be fine.
It seems okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Exhibit 4 is admitted.
If we could go back to Exhibit 3, please, on slide 7. With respect to camera 8, did you prepare a video, prepare an exhibit of the video from camera 8?
Yes.
And again, how did you prepare that?
I had, again, the original proprietary video file, and I created a subclip from the beginning to the end of the events depicted with this event on that camera.
And would it be accurate to call the exhibit that you created kind of the raw footage?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
It means it's the unprocessed original video.
And does that mean it's not zoomed in to see events closely?
Correct.
Mark, please.
State's Exhibit 5 marked.
Handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 5. You take a look at that and see if that is the video from camera 8, the raw footage from camera 8.
Yes.
I'd offer Exhibit 5.
Okay, sidebar.
Yes. Okay, Ms. Hicks?
Yes. Your Honor, with respect to Exhibit 5, then we'll hold off on publishing until council has a chance to look at it. Did you similarly prepare I'm sorry, maybe we can go back to slide 8 of Exhibit 1, please. I'm sorry, Exhibit 3. And did you similarly prepare an exhibit of raw footage from camera 7?
Yes.
Mark?
This is State's Exhibit 6 marked for ID.
Handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 6. You just confirm confirm this is the raw footage from camera 7.
Yes.
Right?
You mentioned that you had also reviewed the Coban information, the Coban video from Defendant Nelson's car. Is that right?
Yes.
And did you also prepare an exhibit of that?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury, did that video have audio?
Yes, it did.
Did all of it have audio?
No.
Can you just explain to the jury what the difference is?
The in-car video system has two channels of audio. One is the interior of the car. There's a microphone inside the car, and one is is attached to the officer, and it's a body microphone. And the Coban system is set up such that when there's going to be contact, then an officer can engage. It's called triggering the recording system. That trigger process has what's called a pre-event. So when the button is pushed, or the emergency lights are engaged, or some other trigger event, it will cause the system to hold what is held in buffer, because it's always recording. It will begin to record that information. I think the Coban in this case is constantly recording, but the trigger causes the audio to engage. So we have constant video, and then the audio is engaged when it's triggered. So the triggering creates two channels called two streams. One from a left channel audio, which is the body-worn microphone. The right channel audio is from inside the car. So they're recording two different streams of information. And when the officer leaves the car, the body-worn recording is intended to record audio communication that may occur outside the car. And that's what we have in this case. We have forward-facing video stream and two independent audio streams.
And you said that there are different ways to trigger the audio, one of which was initiating lights and sirens. Is an officer able to trigger the audio to begin recording as well?
Yes, and I've consulted for Coban over the years, and they've changed a number of their technologies. And at that time, this is actually an older system. In 2019, they could trigger when they get out of the car by initiating the recording from the body pack, or they could initiate inside the car.
So as you exit the car, you could press a button to start audio recording?
Could do. You could press it at any time. Doesn't mean exiting the car. It could be done at any time.
And in terms of this exhibit that you prepared, did you add a timestamp to it?
I added the timestamp, yes.
Can you just explain to the jury how you did that?
Well, the purpose of the timestamp is firstly to have a reference for when I'm speaking in this kind of environment, and I'm going to discuss an image or a series of images so that they all have the same reference for time. And that reference is to within a thousandth of a second, so a millisecond. The timestamp that I created corresponded with the most accurate time source that was available, which was the computer-aided dispatch record of the events. So when a broadcast was made, we had a computer-aided dispatch record for when that broadcast was made. I could see when the broadcast was made on video. Everything conformed to that timestamp. So the Coban timestamp that's on screen is inaccurate. It keeps accurate runtime, but the time that it's displayed is not the accurate time of day.
So explain what you mean by that. It keeps accurate runtime, but not the accurate time of day.
Well, when we look at the time stamp that's on the video, the recording is about 30 frames per second. The timestamp shows some depicted seconds to have 24, 25, 26 images. Some have up to 40 images. So within a second, the timestamp is not specifically accurate in reference to the images. But over a period of like 10 seconds, the linear runtime is accurately represented. So in other words, when it shows 10 seconds has passed, 10 seconds has passed in the events of times. But from 33 millisecond, 33 thousandths of a second to the next 33 thousandths of a second, the timestamp is not perfectly accurate. That's why we needed the correct times, or an accurate timestamp to depict the passage of time.
Okay, and so on this exhibit that you prepared, you put the accurate timestamp?
Yes.
I could have this marked, please.
The state's exhibit 7 marked.
Handing you what's been marked as State Exhibit 7. Just verify that that is the co-band exhibit, video exhibit that you prepared.
Yes.
All right, now you mentioned a minute ago that there are timestamps on some of the videos. The surveillance videos from camera 7 and camera 8, did they have timestamps on them?
Yes.
And were they accurate to real time?
No.
Or were they consistent with each other?
No.
So what did you do in order to figure out, because they're recording the same event from two different locations, correct?
Yes.
Can you just explain to the jury then, how do you sort out and accurately put times on these videos?
Yes. If you're looking at slide 8 on this exhibit that we've been talking about, at the bottom left-hand corner there is a date and timestamp on all of the images. This camera 7 and camera 8, are what's referred to as IP cameras, so Internet Protocol cameras. They have their own independent clock, and so each one is like our wristwatches. How they're they're not really analog, they're digital, but they're set by an individual, and they're not always accurate. So in this case, they weren't accurate. Additionally, the encoding or the capture and creation of images isn't always exactly the same intervals apart. So by that I mean when we watch television, and it normally broadcast today is at 30 frames per second. That means that every 33.33 milliseconds, so very short period of time, we have a new image. And then there is a delay between the creation of the next image that's being presented to us. Because it's moving at 33 frames per second, our brains and our eyes see it as motion video. But when we stop it and look, when there's fast motion, we can see that we've missed some of the activity. So these cameras have what's called a variable image refresh rate. Their sampling isn't exactly 33 milliseconds. It is variable. So there is some delay. One image might be delayed by 28 milliseconds, another one might be 40 milliseconds, and so that they're not perfectly aligned. These cameras have a different timestamp than each other because of the time clock. So in order to align them, each second had to be represented with 30 frames on both cameras. Doesn't matter what the timestamp says. That creates an accurate sort of image by image video. And then in order to synchronize them, to make them represent the same time, there's activity on both cameras that is depicted at almost the same moment in time. For instance, there's people walking. We can see their left and right foot strike the ground. Those could be matched up on both cameras to say that's a sync point. There are a number of images where vehicles are in the parking lot and the driver applies the brakes, and we can see the brake lights come on. That's a sync point because the brake lights come on both cameras. I can synchronize them so they come on at the exact same time. So there are a number of moments like that. When the officer steps out of the car, you can see when his foot strikes the ground on both camera views. So those are all sync points that once one is aligned, they all should align, and they have done in this case. So that's how those two cameras are synchronized.
All right, so it sounds like you were able to synchronize all of the video evidence so that two or more of the sources could be aligned so that the events are happening at the same time. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, through the process you just described?
Yes.
Using the video evidence we just discussed and that we're going to offer, were you able to track the location of Defendant Nelson and Mr. Sarey on a Google map, like what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Okay. And did you create a demonstrative that shows those locations along with the video evidence that you used to track their motions?
Yes.
And did you apply a timestamp to those as well?
Yes.
That was marked, please.
States Exhibit 8, Bert.
Thank you. Handing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 8. Is that the demonstrative that you created, track the locations?
Yes.
I guess I'll call it Part 1, is that right?
Yes.
And did you apply a timestamp to that demonstrative?
Yes.
I would offer demonstrative Exhibit 8.
I think it's based on the other exhibits.
Is that true, counsel? Or is it?
It's the ones I disclosed last night. These are the ones that I gave yesterday morning. I can't remember what time it's at. The same ones.
So these are the same ones that were turned over yesterday? Okay,
It's a demonstrative.
It's fine.
all right. Exhibit 8 is admitted?
Thank you. All right, if you could pull that up and just kind of walk the jury through what you're showing here. Okay, so can you just explain to the jury what we're looking at here and help us get oriented?
Yes. This is the Google Earth view that we looked at in the first exhibit, and I'll put my cursor over.
Do you need a pointer, or you just want to use your cursor?
Well, I can see my cursor. If it would assist the jury, I could use a pointer. I can get up and do that as well. I'm putting my cursor up and down the
Perhaps the
roadway.
court would inquire if the
I
jurors
was going
need
to say,
a
jurors,
pointer.
can you see would you rather him point or is the cursor okay? Okay, we have consent.
Go ahead.
So this is the same area that we had looked at in the earlier view. This is Auburn Way North, and this is the Merchants Acceptance building, and then the grocery store. And I've placed a timestamp of 17:57:34, and that is 5:57 and 34 seconds in the evening. And this is based on the information from CAD as to when things occurred. So it's probably within a few seconds of the accurate time of day.
Okay. And can we also see the Walgreens and the Starbucks on this Google Earth?
Yes, the Walgreens I'm pointing to at the top right-hand corner, and the field of view from the camera I discussed is approximately the location I'm showing with the cursor. And the Starbucks is just on the kind of center top portion of the image.
Okay. And if you want to go ahead and proceed with it and just explain to the jury what we're looking at.
Yeah, so I'll just play this as a video, and I'll just stop it
Stop
for.
it for a second? Yeah, go ahead.
So the image that came up at 17:57:37 is the field of view from the police vehicle, and this is the Coban recording. And what I've placed at the very top of the image in the center is a red dot, and that dot is just representing the position of the police vehicle. And as the vehicle progresses on the video images, the red dot will just show its progression and approximate position on the roadway.
Okay, go ahead. If I could just stop you for just a moment there. Is there any audio associated with the Coban at this point?
No, not at this point.
All right. And when we get to this section where you stopped right there, we see a green area that you've highlighted. Can you just explain to the jury what that is?
There's a camera 5, at Merchants Acceptance, which looks toward the Walgreens, and depicts that roadway. And the police vehicle, as it drives through that field of view, is synchronized and is seen driving through the field of view in this upper camera position.
All right, so now you've got 2 camera positions on the exhibit, on the demonstrative, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. And if we could stop there for just a moment. So just for orientation, where is the Walgreens relative to the red dot, excuse me?
Just to the, it's upper in the image, but from the perspective of the car, it's to the right-hand side of the passenger side of the vehicle.
Okay, keep going. And then, if you can stop there, I see that the video has popped up, another video. Can you just explain to the jury what we're seeing there?
Yes, at 17:58 and 46 seconds, the police vehicle has entered the field of view of the Walgreens camera, and it's depicted at the approximately center of the camera image going left to right. And this is the field of view, again, below of the Coban vehicle as it enters that field of view.
Okay, you can go ahead. Right, and is that the conclusion where Lieutenant Nelson parked his car near the Starbucks or the Walgreens?
Yes, and at 17:59:35, we see him walking in front of the police vehicle, left to right.
Okay, I'm sorry, could you back that up? I was a little premature in my question, just so the jurors can see it. Okay. Your Honor, I'm just cognizant of the time, so.
This is probably a good place for us to stop for the day. One change to your schedule, ladies and gentlemen, is that on Mondays and Thursdays, we will be stopping around this time, no later than 5 minutes till 3 o'clock at the very latest, to accommodate some things that we need to do. And that will happen through, I think, the next to the last week of June. So you can keep that in mind, that on Mondays and Thursdays, you will be recessed a little early, and we'll have a shorter lunch break on those days. As we discussed previously, on Fridays, you are not required to be here, so you can go about your affairs. You are required to return on Monday. And in the meantime, the orders that I always give you remain in play. You are a member of this jury, and as a member of the jury, you also are an officer of court, and you must conduct yourself accordingly. You must remain away from anything that could improperly influence you about this case. You must not do any research about anything having to do with this case. You must stay away from any media, social posts, newspaper outlets, social networking, or anything that could any way impact or have any substance or issues that are related to this case. Do not post anything about the fact that you are on this trial on your social media. Do not talk to your friends or family members, coworkers, or anyone about the fact that you are on this case. If there's something that you need to advise the court of that occurs between now and when we see you again on Monday morning, you can reach out to Ms. Doris and she will alert the court. to that, and we will address it on Monday morning. With that, and reminding you of the orders that I will give every time we leave this room, you are excused for the weekend. We will see you Monday morning at the time, I believe, at 8:30, Ms. Flores, or 8:15? At the latest, like, so with parking, try and make sure you're here between 8:15, 8:30. On Mondays and Thursdays, if we can get started a little earlier than 9, we'll try to do that, but we need everybody here to do that. So with that, I am going to excuse you for the weekend. Have a good weekend. We will see you Monday morning for a jury. Except for jury number 3, we need you to remain in the jury room.
In the jury.
All right, be seated. It's Thursday, so a couple of things. We do need to address the juror issue, but I want to do that outside the presence of our podcast people, our live streaming. So let's address as far as next week and witnesses.
So, before Mr. Fredericks leaves, we need to mark whatever he was looking at to refresh his recollection.
Thank you. I have a list of exhibit issues we need to address as well. So we need to have copies of Defense Exhibit 1, Prosecutor's Exhibit 2. Madam Clerk, have you received those? Okay. Those are admitted.
That's what I referenced.
And then we need to have marked for identification purposes, whatever it is Mr. Frederick used to refresh his memory.
So it was his report, Your Honor.
Oh, okay.
I can mark his report again, but that's what he preferred.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to mark.
So we'll just get a copy of the report and have that marked for identification purposes. After council has an opportunity to review exhibits
It's 5, 6, and 7, Your Honor. And,
5, 6, and 7, we need to admit those. And then at some point, we're going to need to discuss how we're going to deal. The majority of the evidence in this case is going to be on thumb drives. We all know that. I don't want to have to stop and deal with this every time we have to admit them. So council need to figure out a way to address this so that we're not having to wait to admit something because someone hasn't had an opportunity to review it. Preferably, you provide those the night before or something along those lines so that we literally don't have this issue that we had today. So I'm going to leave that for you all to work out, but that would be my preference to make sure that anything that you're going to admit that's on a thumb drive so that it needs, or anything that would take more than 2 seconds to review is given to the other side the evening before. So then it's just a matter of having the clerk mark it so that they know what the exhibit number is, but they know what is on that thumb drive or in that document.
Just so the record is clear, so that was the sidebar.
I was
So
just,
I raised the concern
I was
because.
just about to get to that. So
Okay.
Sorry.
speaking of that, that is why we had to stop for sidebar. The sidebar that we discussed was exactly about the issue we discussed, which is that counsel, Mr. Leary brought up, counsel for the defense, Mr. Leary brought up the fact that he had not had an opportunity to actually review the thumb drives that were being offered, and he felt uncomfortable agreeing to them when he wasn't sure that they were what they purported to be. And so for purposes of trying to address the issues quickly, state agreed not to move to admit them, just mark them for today. And now the court is telling the parties that you need to figure out a better and more efficient way to do this so that we speed this process along. Does anyone want to add anything else to the sidebar conversation that we had?
Not from the state.
No, the concern was specifically the video and digital evidence, because first exhibit, or exhibit 3 with pictures, that's fine to flip through, but it was the recordings that the defense is requesting to have in advance, so I can look at them.
And just to be clear, I mean, obviously we'll we can provide them in advance, but, I mean, this is all the same video that defense already played in opening. It's just structured into bits, I guess is what I would call it. So, but certainly we'll make sure that the defense has them, but I just want to be clear that it's all been disclosed in discovery ad nauseum, I would say, and everyone's looked at it ad nauseum. It's just exhibits structured for purposes of the jury being able to digest it.
I also want to remind the parties that we'll have quite a bit of video evidence and testimony on the videos in this case, so whenever possible, please be mindful of using timestamps so that we have an accurate record of what is being played in court, and for appellate purposes review. Also want to remind everyone that please, when you're at the podium, use the mic, make sure you're speaking into the mic so that we're capturing what everyone is saying. And now, I think that is all that I need to catch up on for things that we need to get on the record, but we do need to discuss our lineup for next week.
Your Honor, I have, before we do that, I'm sorry, there was just a couple of things I don't want to forget. We had a sidebar this morning that I want to make sure we just briefly put on the record, just so nobody wonders if they look back what the heck we were talking about. It was just scheduling issues of when we were going to break for lunch. Not sure there's much more we need to do with that because we needed to do setup for openings and things like that. The other thing I wanted to say before I forget, I cannot see Mr. Fredericks at all. It was literally a voice in the void. I saw a hand every now and then and maybe the top of his head, but I couldn't see him at all. So we do have to adjust that monitor because I don't believe any of us at the table could see him.
All right, we need to do that for Monday. Is it possible to move it to the other side then, so that you're looking at it that way?
Yeah, I still,
Oh, I see.
it's better, but it's, can you see, but Mr. Leary can't see it all.
Let's see where he sits. If he sits, if Frederick sits there, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw a hand every now and then, so.
Okay, all right. Anything else we need to address that you want to bring up before we move to witnesses, and then we need to address the issue with the juror number 3.
The only other thing did the court admit the PowerPoint exhibits from opening? Because I don't think those would be normally something that's admitted. I thought the court said those would be admitted.
Oh, you know what? I think I did, and they should not be admitted.
Yeah, that's-
So, Madam Clerk, thank you for catching that. They just need to be marked for identification purposes. I'm going to withdraw the admission of those. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
I just had one thing, Your Honor. And we talked about this the other day, but considering how close the prosecution table is to the jury, I just wanted to be mindful again about saying things out loud that the jury can hear, because there was something said during my opening. I certainly heard it. I would guess that they probably heard it because it's so close, but it just, I know it's not intentional, but it's so close that it's just something I want us to be mindful of.
Okay, all right. Noted, be mindful, and again, be mindful that this courtroom audio has been magnified because of the technology that we're using in this case. Everything is hypersensitive in this courtroom, more so than even the other courtrooms. All right, anything else? Yes, Ms. Seeks.
Oh, no, I was going to address the witness issue.
Okay.
Okay, here's the current plan, and I've already advised the defense of this, but as we know, Dr. Mandel will be here on Monday, so we'll need to interrupt Mr. Fredericks first thing Monday morning to make sure that Dr. Mandel can get on and off. Then Mr. Fredericks will resume testifying. I don't know how long cross is going to be, but I would expect his direct was going to take a day and a half was my best guess. So maybe the defense can let us know how long they think they'll be with Mr. Fredericks. I heard counsel say in opening that she may not take very long with some witnesses. The other people we had kind of planned for this week